Hey guys, we are officially 20 weeks out, around there. We might do a show prior to the 20-week out mark, just because in reality it is a show season, not just a singular show. Typically when you go for shows and you're already in a conditioned state, you want to do a compilation of shows, not just one singular show, because you're already conditioned, right? So we're looking at a show potentially September time. That's going to put us, a little bit before the 20-week out mark, and come in maybe like 85% ready. And come October time, we'll be more on that kind of 95% ready mark, closer to 100%. Then come WNBF Worlds in November time, we are most likely looking at the best kind of conditioning possible when we go into the World Championships. So very exciting stuff. I'm looking at this as an opportunity now, instead of kind of like a lot of people think of prep as like, oh, I have to go through all this difficulty, this challenge, they complain about it. It's like, dude, just be fortunate enough that you get to prep. I don't understand this whole thing of complaining that you have to be in prep. Just don't do a prep if you are going to complain about it. Because in reality, there's so many things, in my opinion, that come from a prep. Good things. It's good for your career. If you work within the fitness space, it's good for just overall challenging yourself. Getting to see how your body changes and moves week to week. We've been in a diet break for the past 5 to 6 weeks, and each phase has its kind of purpose. A fat loss phase or a contest prep setting, you're going to see detail week after week come through. Unless you have a good amount of body fat present on your frame, then that detail mark won't come in until the fat cells are small enough. But for a diet break setting or a off-season setting, the goal is to gain fullness and gain some strength, right? So each phase has its purpose, but I'm just trying to be present with every single phase that I go into. This diet break has been good. Contest prep setting will also be good too. And off season will be awesome too. I'm looking to execute the next off season much more efficiently than my last one. I'm thinking way too ahead right now, but just really looking forward to every phase ahead of me from now. So going into the session today, we're working more with a different kit. So obviously the pieces at Ultraflex compared to UFC gym, which is a more commercialized gym for now at least, just got bought out by a new owner. But going into the Ultraflex gym, we have more bodybuilding centric pieces, which in turn should be better in terms of just overall padding of the machines, right? Compared to some kind of commercial equipment. Hoist is typically really poor kind of made pieces. I understand a lot of gyms, commercial gyms especially, get pieces wholesale, so you can't really blame commercial gyms for having not the best pieces. But with really good skill, you can make any piece work, which I think is important when going into just separate gyms. So typically in a prep setting, maybe 10 weeks out, I would not start moving gyms and just being at different gyms. But 20-week out mark, it's totally okay to be at different gyms. I have preferences when it comes to that. It's a very individual thing. Going into leg days, I would definitely not be shifting gyms quite often, even if I'm at the 20-week out mark, just because I like to keep my leg day numbers, logbook numbers, fairly accurate week to week. But like I mentioned, it's very individual preferenced. But going into upper body sessions, pulling sessions, pushing sessions, I don't mind going to other gyms. If I ever have an arm day, that's a scenario to try out another gym too, or I wouldn't be so adamant about keeping logbook numbers in total accuracy. So not too many things are going to change. I've been recently, prior to going into season, I've been just eyeballing my sodium, my electrolytes, my pink salt and low salt, my sodium and potassium. But going into a contest prep setting, most likely we're just going to weigh out every single meal's electrolytes from sodium and potassium. When it comes to sodium and potassium, you typically want double the sodium to potassium ratio, whatever you're intaking. So either a 2-to-1 sodium to potassium ratio, 3-to-1, or 4-to-1, depending on how much potassium you're intaking based off of your own individual kind of needs. So just keep that in mind. You do need potassium and sodium. Gone are the days of sodiumless peak weeks. I like to think most coaches out there have gotten rid of those kind of old school methodologies, because you need sodium to move carbohydrates from the gut into the bloodstream, right? And potassium to kind of assimilate everything, as well as sodium too. So gone are those days. Hopefully, if you have a coach that's pulling sodium from your peak weeks, you might want to rethink your guidance into a peak week potentially. Just throwing that out there. So we're on the good old reliable iPhone today, just because we haven't filmed with the Osmo Pocket in maybe like 3 to 4 weeks. It's been a while, and unfortunately I misplaced it and I cannot find it. And a big thing going into this prep is I am just trying to keep stress to an all-time low and just making things work where possible, right? So last night I was searching for the Osmo Pocket for a good half an hour and we couldn't find it. So, part of me wanted to just keep searching and just not take no for an answer and just find it, right? But it was kind of stressing me out a little bit, so I just thought, I'll just record with the iPhone. It's not a big, huge difference. I can just get some clips, I could still get some content with an iPhone versus an Osmo Pocket. Quality difference isn't going to be massive, right? I'm recording in a car while putting B-roll in the back. But we are going to Ultraflex today. Just needed to change the environment a little bit going into the contest prep setting. Lighting, your atmosphere, the content you create. If you're recording at a 24-hour fitness, there's nothing wrong with that, but the atmosphere you have your content in does kind of play a role in the viewers that look at your content, right? They can clearly see, hey, that's a 24-hour fitness, LA Fitness. And just the vibes of this gym that we're going to today are just overall more bodybuilding centric, if that makes sense. So I think it'll contribute a good amount to this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, by the way. But yeah, not too much changes planned ahead for the differences between this diet break and the contest prep setting. We've basically been in a contest prep setting regardless. We've basically been in season since March. No off-plan meals. The only thing changing is pretty much just calories being pulled. Come the 10-week out mark, we're most likely going to start dialing it in a little bit more in terms of just overall headspace, where you kind of put the hoodie on, keep the world out kind of mentality. But 20 weeks out is not really a time to just be super, I don't want to say locked in, but more just isolated, I guess you could say, just really focus and process dependent, because as you know, bodybuilding is a long-term kind of sport. If you are just super hood-on, world-out mentality throughout your entire years, yeah, it could work for some people, but for the majority of people, you still have lives aside from bodybuilding, right? So it's good to maintain balance and not to kind of burn yourself out from being in this super sympathetic position all the time. But in a contest prep setting, especially when I'm 10 weeks out lean, I'm just gonna naturally be in a more sympathetic state just from having less body fat and my physiological self being more in a state of fight or flight, because it just wants food, right? So that's going to also play a role in sleep. I'm coaching Noah right now, and his sleep is, if you guys know Noah, his sleep is tremendous for being as lean as he is. He's still getting really great sleep scores, and we haven't had to put any kind of sleep supplementation in. So that guy, he's just a phenomenal bodybuilder, man, and it's his first time too. So I'm not sure if he's watching this, but just know it's not really normal to have this good sleep in a contest prep setting, but it's because he's managed everything so well. For his first time prep, the glutes are in, the glutes are boxed off, the glute lines are in too. If you guys want to see Noah's process, you can check out my Instagram. I have him linked in one of my posts. But yeah, he is around 3 to 5 weeks out right now, 3 and 5 weeks out, because he's doing 2 shows. One's going to be an OCB show over in Arizona, so he's going to fly out for that, and he's going to do an NPC natural show right before around July, in mid-July, around that time. So he's going to do an OCB pro qualifier come mid-June, and then 2 weeks after that, we're most likely just going to be in reverse calories, unless he needs to deplete a little bit more. He's going to be doing the NPC Natural Oregon show come late June. So pretty much, I think that's June 29th. The 28th, I believe, is the pros that are not drug tested, and 29th, I believe, are the naturals, whether it's pros or just amateurs or both. I'm not too sure, but he's already signed up for both the shows, so it's already a green lit kind of scenario. But if you guys don't know, I am doing just purely WNBF shows this year, and the MBW in the UK too, just because I'd love to meet AJ in person. You know, we've been working together for already over a year now at this point, and would just be awesome to kind of live the gym experience in Ultraflex in Rotherham, because that's where I see most of the really top natural bodybuilders train. You know, I like to think a lot of the top guys in the natural space are from the UK, and it's kind of unfortunate that we don't have a bigger scene here in the USA, but hopefully, no, I'm not saying hopefully, you know, one day it will be bigger for a fact in, you know, America. Another thing going into gyms that you guys can do in different gyms if you have a logbook is, you know, obviously the weights are going to be a lot different compared to your normal weights, and you might get more reps, less reps. So I'd say, you know, work within the higher rep ranges first, then go into your lower rep ranges. You know, the goal with everybody I coach, at least in my kind of training, is complete failure, you know, or at least very close to failure, where you know the next rep you're going to take is pretty much failure. So obviously going into the sessions, you're going to test out your logbook numbers, and if you get much more than you intended, just go up to the higher rep range. You know, like typically we start with the lower rep ranges first, and then move over into the higher rep ranges. But in the case of sorry, things are merging right now on the freeway. But in the case of just being at a different gym, I would say once you start with that higher rep set, once you finish that, base your lower rep set off of the higher rep set that you just had. It's a bit of a mouthful, but hopefully you guys understand what I'm trying to get at. I'm expecting a lot better convergence in the pressing machines at this gym. Better back machines too. Of course, UFC gym doesn't have the best back machines, but I'm hoping that's going to change in a couple months with the new owner. If you guys hadn't noticed, we are doing an upper body day today. We're starting off with leg raises to kind of prime the forearms and the core, going into pulling, which is a vertical pull, lat pull down, and a horizontal-esque pull with a single arm dumbbell row, a more density kind of based horizontal pull, more thickness based one. And then we move into our presses, which will be the high incline, which is going to be more shoulder dominant for sure. Then we move over into our horizontal press, which will be a chest press. After the chest press, we go into, I believe, it's laterals. So some shoulder isolation work, going into some traps. You know, I like to think some shoulder and doing lateral raises will use some traps. You know, it's very difficult to isolate the shoulders from the traps, just because that movement pattern is pretty similar when trying to abduct the elbow up. Then we move into traps. Then we go into our tricep pushdowns, isolation work for arms. Then we kind of end off with biceps. So if you think about it, moving into triceps before biceps, you know, triceps, you go through elbow extension downwards for the concentric. Then for bicep curls, any bicep isolation work, you go through elbow flexion. So you're pretty much priming the elbow to go through, oh, I think I missed my exit now. But you're pretty much priming the elbow to go through both directions, extension and flexion. Probably a better idea to go through extension first, because I've seen my fair share of injuries, which is straight up curls and curls first. So that's the kind of idea behind why most programming, I like to think, is triceps first. Most programming, from what I've seen in general, you know, I've been through all the programs. I've been through Jeff Nippard's programs. I had one of David Lade's old programming sheets like a long time ago, like maybe in 2017, 2018. So I've been through my fair share of programs, but programs I think that I made the most progress off of in the beginning ends of my lifting journey, or probably the Jeff Nippard programs. And now that I understand the kind of methodologies behind training, because, you know, obviously I program every one of my clients' programs differently from each other, within regards to the equipment at their gym. Of course, if they're at the same gym, their programming might look a bit similar, but I understand now why I've made more progress off of certain programs off of others. When you're a beginner, you can definitely handle more frequency. Your volume demands intra-session aren't as high, but as you continuously progress load and reps, you definitely cannot recover between sessions, right? So that's the kind of idea behind programming and experience level. The more experienced you are, typically, you will not be able to handle more frequency. So the only kind of thing to look at is either 1, execution, or 2, maybe intra-session volume 2, or intensity, of course. But that's the take on programming. Pretty sure that's going to be all the B-roll I have for today. This is already a 20+ minute video. This is me pre-session, by the way, if you guys didn't know. But hope you guys enjoyed this little update going into prep. Super excited to go into the season. I'm gonna try to be present as much as possible going into this, because last season I was just thinking of after the show season, I would just binge and eat and just look forward to after the show. But it's kind of like a terrible mentality to have, like I'm just looking into after the show, because why would you not want to be present during such an important moment in your life? I like to think, or it's a very important moment in my life, at least. It's not every year you get to compete. So the goal within this show season is just to be as present as possible. Obviously, manage life as great as possible too, because being in a show season does not mean you have to give up some of your life, right? Whether it's career related, coaching related, like all my guys will still get the same level of quality of service that they know they get within my coaching. So yeah, work, life, relationship will all stay the same the whole way through prep. That's the goal, and we're just gonna make the most out of the season and do our best. You guys, hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you guys are killing it in the gym. Hope you guys are killing it at life, and have a wonderful rest of your day, guys.